First and foremost, we have Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson is an American actor, comedian, writer, director, businessman, producer. He is not just all those things. When he's not crafting his talents on screen or in front of a live audience, he spends his time with his family outside Oregon. His family and him, they're members of the Baha'i faith. He hosts a podcast for the Baha'i blog called the Baha'i Blogcast, where he interviews notable people about the intersection of their faith and their work. And here we have three amazing people as well. Monique Stevens, she's a local teacher and mother to Tampa Bay, where we're from in Florida, who has been involved for decades in activities promoting the principles of racial equality and the oneness of humankind. Monique speaks frequently at public meetings, addressing these and other issues from her perspective as member of the Baha'i faith. Most recently, Monique has been involved with other Baha'is in the creation of a local race unity task force for the purpose of developing more effective responses to what Shoghi Effendi calls our country's, the United States, our country's most challenging issue. Now, Mr. William Varner, he is a native of Atlanta, Georgia, a husband of 48 years, a father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He has been a Baha'i for 57 years, serving as an international pioneer to Zambia and Canada in various administrative capacities. And not just that, he's facilitated workshops on diversity, overcoming racism as a member of the National Coalition Building Institute, co-founder of an interactive theater group addressing social ills, helping coordinate youth activities at the local Native Friendship Center. And he's also served at the Maxwell International Baha'i School. He is a founding member of the Black Baha'i Men's Gathering and the founder and CEO of the Ever Advancing Center for Human Development Incorporated. And just as important, Miss Bahji Varner. She is a Baha'i middle school teacher and mother of three from Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. She has been involved in Baha'i community building activities and serves on the Community Engagement Committee for the National Race Amity Institute. She has been leading diversity efforts at her school, which serves the culturally transitioning neighborhood of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center and the Atlanta Baha'i Center. She has been facilitating staff training on overcoming bias, as well as weekly conversations with students for several years. Bahji earned a graduate certificate in diversity, social justice, and inclusion from the University of Colorado Springs, and she is passionate about healing racism. Growing up with the Baha'i principles of oneness and being raised in the multicultural family in the South, overcoming racism and promoting unity have been and will remain lifelong strivings. With that being said, we've introduced all four of our wonderful speakers. Please, Rainn, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. This is a little strange. I can't see people's faces, but I see that there's all kinds of people watching. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. I've never been to Clearwater, Florida, but I imagine it's really nice. So this is an amazing opportunity that this pandemic has offered us to have these meetings. And I'm sitting in my house in Los Angeles, and we've got Bahji in Atlanta, and we get to be sitting in your living rooms in Clearwater, Florida. So it's really an honor to be asked to speak to people in Clearwater, Florida. This isn't going to be a speech by me. This isn't a lecture by me. This isn't a sermon. Certainly it's not a sermon. There's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. So what we've assembled today is a panel of people speaking on what is called in the Baha'i faith the most vital and challenging issue, and the issue of racism. Perhaps later we'll go into some basics of the Baha'i faith in case there are people on board who just don't know anything about it. But I thought it would be best, we all thought it would be best to just kind of jump in and tackle this issue. And this is something that we Baha'is take very seriously. It's central to our beliefs as followers of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. The healing of racism, Baha'is believe, needs to happen not just legislatively, but spiritually, because it's a spiritual disease that affects the heart. So I'm just going to speak a little bit from my experience for a short amount of time, and then throw to some of our other esteemed speakers and panelists, because I really personally also really want to hear what they have to say on the issue. Because I want to say, as I start off, that part of my journey of discovery around racism is a journey of discovery around my own privilege. And for those white people in the audience that might have a negative reaction to that idea of privilege, that privilege doesn't mean that white people, that each one of us haven't suffered in some way, shape, or form, or been treated unfairly, or had to go through a lot of tests and obstacles to get to where we're at. However, I know from my white privilege, which, by the way, being male, middle-aged, well-off, a television celebrity, I'm at the top of the privilege pyramid. But my privilege worked in so many other ways, whether it's being immediately trusted by law enforcement officers, whether it's just never having experienced one iota of being any kind of harassment or mistrust, whether it's walking through a department store and not being followed, never having to have a talk with my teenage son about how to behave in front of policemen, plus all the doors that have just been held wide open for me, especially as an actor, that when I got interested in acting and wanted to study it, that the doors were just held open for me. Just like, here's a scholarship, here's a place to study, here's roles you can play, where I know for so many people of color and African-American friends and classmates of mine, their journey to try and get in the door of like the acting profession is was so much more fraught than mine. You know, I was thinking about racism as similar to climate change. Forgive me for saying so, but climate change was something that became very, very interesting to me a couple of years ago. And because I saw how vast the ramifications of climate change are, especially, and you can have a whole conversation about the race elements in climate change, because it's many communities of people of color that will be most greatly affected by it. But when I wanted to know about climate change, when I wanted to learn about climate change, what did I do? I talked to experts. I had to get humble and I had to learn from people who really knew about this issue. And that's what I've also had to do with racism. Like, whatever I thought I knew about racism growing up in suburban Seattle, I had to kind of put aside and say, hey, wait a minute. I need to take a humble posture of learning and learn from the experts, because this is a field that has been studied in depth for over 100 years with countless books and studies. So I've been studying it for the last several years. Studying is the wrong word. I've been trying to learn, and there's a couple of amazing books out there that I'm going to show you that I've been reading. I have some quotes here. One of them I'm almost done with here, called White Fragility: Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. This is a really brilliant book. It has taught me so much. You know, so many of people in my family have the reaction of, well, I didn't own slaves. I'm not racist. This isn't my problem. And this book really delves into that issue into a much deeper way. This one I haven't gotten to yet, How to Be an Anti-Racist, but it's in my reading list. But the reason that I bring up this book as well is, again, learning from experts in a field that I know next to nothing about. One of the things that's been being said a lot recently is a number of white people, my relatives included, show up and say, well, I'm not racist. And there's a whole idea that's been out there just for the last couple of years percolating, which is really interesting. That is a challenge to white people everywhere to say, it's not enough to say, well, I'm not racist, but you have to stand up and be an anti-racist, to be an active, proactive change agent in fighting racism wherever you participate in it, wherever you see it, whether you hear comments from family members, whether it's in your business or school, whether it's in your local police department, wherever it is, that we're active agents, proactive agents of change in fighting racism. And that's certainly something that I've never really been, frankly, and something I would like to learn how to do. And I have some other Baha'i quotes here about racism. And just real quick before I throw it over to our other wonderful speakers, here's a quote, a very simple one from the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah: let deeds, not words, be your adorning. And this quote reminded me of this phrase about, well, I'm not racist. You can say, well, I'm not racist, but that's not a deed. So deeds, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. In other words, lead with your actions. Faith without works is dead, says James from the Bible. So what are my works? What are my deeds? Well, deeds that I can enact that actively fight racism. Because there may be some people out there that don't know much about the Baha'i faith. I'll throw out a couple of other introductory quotes and then I'll pass it on. One of my favorite quotes from the Baha'i faith is from the founder Baha'u'llah, who lived in Persia, Iran in the mid 1800s. Baha'u'llah claims to be the most recent of divine teachers or prophets, messengers. Baha'is call them manifestations of God. This, esteemed group of divine teachers include Jesus and include the Buddha and Krishna, Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, many, many others. And this quote says, be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. Exigencies meaning like extreme needs. So we're taught as Baha'is we pray and meditate and believe in one God and do all the stuff that other people do in other religions, but we also speak about the needs of the age we live in. And one of the needs of the age we live in, maybe the most important one right now, is racism. Baha'u'llah also said the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. And this is a central teaching of the Baha'i faith that is building unity and seeing the whole world as one country and everyone on it as spiritual beings sharing this planet. There's many other quotes here I have. I'm not going to get to them all today, but I just wanted to kind of set the scene of what we're talking about today and hear from our other colleagues. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Monique, who's from Clearwater, and Monique Stevens, and let her address you, and we'll hear from the other speakers. And I'm here if folks have questions, and I know there'll be a Q&A at the end, and I'm excited to see what everyone has to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rainn. Good morning, everyone. And just really quickly, I actually live in Temple Terrace, which is in the Tampa Bay area. And I just mentioned that so that all of my friends who are here don't think that I moved. So, I'm getting a lot of feedback. So if everyone could mute their mics, that would help with that. Okay, so I'm still getting a lot of feedback, and maybe it's which I don't usually get. And I think, John, if you just hit mute all participants, then yeah, okay, thanks. So Rainn set the stage really well for what we're going to be discussing today. I just like to piggyback a little bit on some of the things that he said. The reason we're here is, for those of you who may not be very familiar with the Baha'i faith, is because the Baha'i faith, our purpose as Baha'is is to create unity. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, his revelation, the reason he came and he brought us the Baha'i faith was to create unity. So Baha'is have a strong understanding of our responsibility to work toward ending racism. The question becomes, how do we do that? Why is it so challenging to do that? Because even though we're Baha'is and we embrace these principles of the unity of humanity, it doesn't make us automatic experts on how to do that. We do have an abundance of writings and guidance that helps us in this direction, but we still live in a society that is very racist, and we're not immune to the effects of racism. We're not immune to the pernicious influence of racism in our own psyches, in our own communities. So we do still have work to do, and the first step is to recognize that we have that work to do. I recently put together kind of an appeal, I don't know what else to call it, to the allies in the fight against racism, and particularly our white allies. And the reason I did this is because I see this moment in history that we're going through right now as perhaps a turning point. I've never seen so many people of all races just completely outraged by this latest horrendous murder of George Floyd being slowly tortured to death in front of our eyes. Perhaps it was the manner, perhaps it was because of how long it took and it was just televised or the video. But whatever the reason is, I think that we can't afford to lose this momentum. And so when I saw people, friends, white friends that I've had for years, responding proactively, responding with outrage, responding with action, I wanted to seize the moment, and I wanted to make sure that that momentum was not lost. And so I put together just a little, well, I won't say little, I'll make it brief for this presentation, but I put together a written appeal, and I'm just going to touch on some of those points because I think they're very important. It's important to say them. Sometimes we think some of these things, but it's important to really say these things out loud and to not be afraid to discuss them. So I'm just going to refer a little bit to my notes because I tend to get a little emotional when I'm talking about these things and I have to put it in writing. So I basically outlined a way for our allies, white allies, to prepare themselves mentally for this fight against racism, this long, long fight against racism. The first thing I asked my white allies to do is to know in advance that this is going to be really, really hard work. And it may be one of the most difficult things that you ever do when you commit yourself to the fight against racism. You should be prepared to feel very strong emotions, conflicting emotions, sadness, grief, anger, fear, frustration, awkwardness, and you need to be comfortable with feeling awkward in conversations. You may feel disoriented as you learn things that challenge the worldview that you've held all of your life about the history of this country. There are Black people who also don't know the depths of the history of racism in this country. So you're not alone. We are used to having to challenge those problems in our daily lives and on a daily basis. So we can help you with some of these feelings that you're feeling, this despair and this hopelessness that you may sometimes feel. You also should be prepared to have very conflicting thoughts and feelings and to not give up when that happens. Because racism, although it is a simple thing in some ways, right, it's also very complex in other ways. You should be prepared to sometimes feel like you're being personally attacked or blamed for things that are beyond your control. And occasionally you may be. No one is perfect. This happens to people of color routinely, where we're blamed and accused and held responsible for things that are completely beyond our control. And we know it sucks, we know it's horrible. So you may feel like giving up, but don't, because usually if you listen carefully, what people are challenging you to do is not to feel guilty about things you had no control over and not to feel accused or that you have to atone for other people's actions. What we're actually challenging you to do as an ally is to take action on the things that are in your control right now. And there are many things that are in your control right now. And we'll talk about, hopefully in this conversation, some of those things. So when a person of color asks you to be an ally, they're not asking you to feel guilty. As a matter of fact, guilt gets in the way of what we're trying to do. You need to know that this is your fight. As a human being, this is your fight. In this country, Black people are only 12% of the population. So hearts and minds cannot be changed without your active, wholehearted, and proactive participation. As Rainn mentioned, you can't sit back and because you don't believe that you are an active racist, right, that you don't need to do anything and tisk perhaps at other people. You need to know that in order to make change, you have to act. You have to act against racism. And there are many ways to do that. You need to know that actively fighting against racism is like buy one, get 10 free. And what do I mean by that? Racism doesn't exist in an intellectual, moral, or spiritual vacuum. And in this country, racism has coarsened our natures and contributed to our willingness to tolerate all kinds of injustice. Racism sits very comfortably with sexism, with classism, with apathy, with selfishness and corruption and greed, with environmental devastation, domestic violence, nepotism, authoritarianism, materialism, hedonism, and a whole bunch of other isms, militarism. I could go on and on. And if you want to fight against those things, or if you see those things as a problem, you can't separate how they're linked to racism. You should be prepared to engage in mental experiments that will cause you some degree of trauma. For example, you should purposely superimpose the image of the face of your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your sister, your brother, your grandparents on the face of the Black victims of police and vigilante violence. You need to really take the time to imagine and feel the emotions of it. It does take a psychological toll. Imagine that toll that it takes on Black people. You need to feel this on a gut level. You don't need to feel it because for reasons of guilt. You don't need to feel it so that you purposely feel bad. You need to feel it so that it deepens your commitment and gives you courage, because this is a hard fight. You should be prepared to spend hours educating yourself about the Black experience in America. There's so much information that you need to know, and that's being kept from you and has been kept from you since birth. Even the average Black person doesn't know a lot of the history that we all need to know to be effective in this fight and to push back against prejudice and stereotypes from friends and relatives and acquaintances and coworkers who don't have this information. When you educate yourself, you will feel more and more empowered to push back against those prejudices and stereotypes, to engage in conversations with those people who aren't ready, to slowly bring them step by step to a point where they are ready to hear and listen. You should be prepared to have a lot of patience because this is, again, a long and hard fight. You should know that however bad you think it is, it's much worse. But we have to tackle it, and we can, and we will be successful in this fight. I have no doubt. I have full confidence. And my faith gives me that confidence, the teachings of my faith, the principles of my faith, but even common sense gives me that confidence. We have no other choice. If you can do these things and more, these are just my reflections, then you will be more than just a fair weather friend, a friend whose commitment to justice depends on their mood or on their level of historical knowledge or on their level or on the level of pushback they get from their friends and acquaintances. So I'll turn it over now because I don't want to take up the whole time. I'll turn it over to others, but those are just some of my reflections. And I thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for already being committed to this fight.
Thank you, Monique. Thanks so much. Bahji?
Hello, good morning. How's everybody?
Good morning.
So the first thing I would like to share is I want to share the whole paragraph that Rainn referenced when he first started, when he talked about racism being our most vital and challenging issue. So I'd like to share that, and that's from Shogi Effendi. And he says, as to racial prejudice, the corrosion of which for well nigh a century has bitten into the fiber and attacked the whole structure of American society, it should be regarded as constituting the most vital and challenging issue confronting the Baha'i community at the present stage of its evolution. The ceaseless exertions which this issue of paramount importance calls for, the sacrifices it must impose, the care and vigilance it demands, the moral courage and fortitude it requires, the tact and sympathy it necessitates. Invest this problem, which the American believers are still far from having satisfactorily resolved, with an urgency and importance that cannot be overestimated. And then I'm going to share, because my kids, my kids are in their 20s and they're sharing quotes with me that they want me to share. So I follow the youth. So I'm going to share one from my son and one from my daughter. My son sent his first, so I'm going to share that. He said, we cannot segregate, this is from Shogi Effendi, we cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Man is organic with this world. His inner life molds the environment and is itself also deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in the life of man is a result of these mutual reactions. Y'all gotta stop sending me quotes. Okay. And then the next one I'll share from my daughter Zamani. Okay, and so okay, she wants to be cognizant of time. I'm gonna share this one though, because my father, when I saw on a Baha'i website, maybe Monday, I saw on BahaiTeachings.org, it said, Baha'is for Black Lives, and it was kind of like a banner. And I was like, wow, we've got to make some signs and some t-shirts, you know? And so, it kind of percolated in my mind for a minute. And then when I went back, I couldn't find it again. But it was in my mind. And so I don't know who came up with that, but whoever did, thank you, because I just love it. And so I was talking to my parents about it because I was so excited. I've been averaging 2-3 hours of sleep at night. I don't know how many of you are doing that right now, because I'm too excited to sleep because of what's going on. I just can't. And so I looked at this quote. I was looking at the guidance to find out, you know, as Baha'is, we're not supposed to get involved in politics. And sometimes, you know, there's been so much debate about all lives matter versus Black lives matter. And I just wanted to be clear that if we promoted that slogan, that it was in line with our teachings. And this is what I found. It said, unlike the nations and peoples of the earth, be they of the East or of the West, democratic or authoritarian, communist or capitalist, whether belonging to the old world or the new, who either ignore, trample upon, or extirpate the racial, religious, or political minorities within the sphere of their jurisdiction. Every organized community enlisted under the name of Baha'u'llah should feel it to be its first and inescapable obligation to nurture, encourage, and safeguard every minority belonging to any faith, race, class, or nation within it. So that to me was, yes, you need to make some shirts, okay? Yes, you need to encourage other Baha'is to realize this is not a political issue. This is a Baha'i issue. This is a human issue. This is a justice issue, and all of that is what we're about. And so, but I waited, I reached out. We have, like Rainn said, we don't have clergy. We have, we elect with secret ballots, no, what do you call that? Outside on the streets, campaigning. Thank you. My kids are yelling, campaigning. So we don't campaign, we pray together, and then we fill out secret ballots. And so any Baha'i community where we have 9 or more people, we have this administrative order that helps to guide us. And so I reached out to the Regional Baha'i Council of the Southeast, two members that are close friends of mine, and I asked them, you know, based on this guidance, would it be okay if this happens? And so we had a conversation. They reached out to a continental counselor who was above them, has been appointed by our Universal House of Justice. So we just have so much protection and such a blessing as Baha'is to have guidance that is based on the writings of Baha'u'llah and the writings of his son, Abdul Baha, who was the center of the covenant, who kept the Baha'is together in a united vision on what, you know, and then I'm a little ADD, be patient, I jump around, and then Abdul Baha's grandson, Shoghi Effendi, was the interpreter. He's known as the guardian of the faith. And so he breaks it down to the nth degree. Like, he gives us these instructions that are just irrefutable. Like, let me tell you what he said. Let me find it. Because this is what my mother said drew her to the faith in the 60s. She said, I knew if a man from Iran was explaining what was going on in the United States in terms of, in terms of racism, if he was able to explain to us what we needed to do, forgive me because I'm just praying for, I may have to share that later, but Rainn, can you pull it up? The quotes that I shared with you about what the white people need to do. Shoghi Effendi gave us homework. He told us what we had to do to overcome racism.
And as a white male, maybe I can just read this for our friends. It's like Bahji said, this is it's extraordinary. He wrote a letter to the Baha'is of North America, which kind of then was known as a book called The Advent of Divine Justice, and it's an incredible clarion call about what the Baha'is of North America need to focus on. There's much more to it than that. And in the section on racism, which again is the most vital and challenging issue to not just the Baha'is of North America, but the people of North America, he gives a very specific advice to white believers in the United States. So this is that paragraph. Let the white make a supreme effort to abandon once and for all their usually inherent and at times subconscious sense of superiority. to correct their tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude towards the members of the other race, to persuade them through their intimate, spontaneous, and informal association with them of the genuineness of their friendship and the sincerity of their intentions, and to master their impatience of any lack of responsiveness on the part of a people who have received for so long a period such grievous and slow healing wounds.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rainn. I needed that help. I was thirsty. But that is very clear. That is very clear that it's something that has to be constantly worked on, the subconscious sense of superiority. This was in the 30s, I think, that Shoghi Effendi wrote that letter. And so we've been studying white privilege for a long time in the Baha'i community. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my personal journey with my passion around this issue, and especially as being an educator. And I'll share a story, and I hope that I don't start crying, because probably everybody's been crying more this week than ever before. But when I was about 3, my parents, maybe 4, but I know it was before we moved to Africa, which was in 1979. We moved to Burkina Faso briefly. We watched Roots. Some people may think, wow, that was traumatic for a child that age. Yes, it was. The boogeyman for me was the KKK. It scared me so bad that at that age, I remember, I have a visual memory of looking around our living room, trying to figure out, with each object I laid eyes on, if the KKK came in, how could I kill them with it? We had and I can still see the blue plaid couch pillows that we had. And so I was telling my kids about that, and we might've cried, but then we laughed about, just the image of a 3-year-old trying to kill somebody with a couch pillow. It was ridiculous. But the powerful thing that came out of that movie for me was understanding the history of reading. I was so inspired by Kizzy learning how to read. And I just, and this morning I put 2 and 2 together. My favorite doll when I was a little girl was named Kizzy, and she was brown and she looked like me. And I thank God that my parents understood the importance of showing me myself. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of media available that we could see ourselves in. And so there's a book I had as a child that when we were living in the projects in the south side of Atlanta, that there were these 3 brothers, white male, blonde hair, blue eyes. And everything in the book was beautiful, like big, beautiful house, all this, everything was just so pretty. And I wanted it. So I wanted to be there so bad, but there was nobody that looked like me. And so I thought that was not something that was attainable for me. And then in 4th grade, I was 9, we moved south, even further south. And if anybody is familiar with Georgia, when you leave Atlanta, you go back in time, okay? You go to other decades that you don't want to be in. So I was in a class all of a sudden where I was the only brown face. My parents have always made a point of raising us in Black neighborhoods because of this community. Also because someone shot their dog and told them they would be next the first time they did live in a different community. So just to be safe, and we were always safe in the Black community. So we moved into a Black community in Griffin, not knowing it was the only Black neighborhood in our school district. So I started school. My teacher never smiled at me that year. And I had been, teacher's pet before that. And so that was very difficult for me. But the thing that most struck me that year was when we were reading our Georgia history book, And all it said about slavery was a very short paragraph, if you can even call it a paragraph, that's how short it was. And it said that the slaves liked to sing while they picked cotton. And then they wrote, you know, this broken English and of the song they like to sing. And my whole class, you know, erupted in laughter. My face is hot and I'm just, you know, just imagine how a 9-year-old feels. And then my teacher, you know, she's just nodding approvingly because that's how she thinks. That's how they all thought at that time. That's curriculum. That's why our schools are closed. That's how I feel. We have to fix it. We have to revolutionize it. We have to tell the truth. We have to empower. My first 6 years, when my son, so back to another place we lived outside of Atlanta, Milledgeville, Georgia. When I was still working on my education, my son was in pre-K. He came home and he said, "Mom, am I dumb? Okay, it's time to move," because my son was brilliant. So we moved. I talked to my Baha'i friends. I talked to all kinds of friends, and I connected with some that were working at a public Montessori school in Decatur, Georgia. And so I found a way to move into that district, and my kids started going there. I got trained in Montessori, taught Montessori, and I taught pre-K and kindergarten combination classes. And when I was in elementary school, I was identified as gifted because of the privilege of my white mother. She went in, first I didn't pass the test because I missed some things like, what's wrong with this picture? There was a light bulb hanging and it didn't have a globe. That didn't look like a problem to me. I'm a child in poverty. The other thing I remember, and mind you, I probably was in first grade, okay? And then the other one was, where does this family leave their dog when they go on vacation? A kennel or this or that or that? First of all, we don't go on vacation. And we did have dogs, but they took care of them. I don't know what we never had a kennel. We never took them to kennels. That wasn't a reality. That test did not test my intelligence. It tested my cultural experience. And so, you know, the tests, the curriculum have been strategically designed to keep those in power in power. They want to make sure their kids can answer the tests. And so when I went to my first teaching assignment, I understood that, and I had high expectations for my kids. And I felt like as a child in elementary, when they used to pull me out to these gifted classes and I mean, I had so much fun, these puzzles, and, you know, it was so exciting. It was hands-on. And I just felt guilty because I was like, why aren't my friends able to do this? Why can't they do this? You know, because my mom was like, no, my child is gonna be in gifted classes. This is, you know, so they listened to my white mother and they put me in, that's what's going on, you guys. And I'm so heartbroken as a teacher, teaching in a gentrifying community, a culturally transitioning community, and I have mixed classes. And in the conclusions that children draw from seeing the white kids in the gifted classes and the Black kids in the other classes, and the kids, they draw conclusions unless you explicitly teach them the truth of history. I'm sorry, okay. Talking too long, I apologize. Next, I want to hear from my dad. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be with you all. I want to share some thoughts on racism. As Rainn stated earlier, racism is a spiritual disease which can only be eradicated by spiritual intervention, namely the changing of the human heart and mind, and recognizing the purpose for which we were all created by our Creator. And many of us have forgotten our purpose for being created. We were not created to be racist. We were not created to be prejudiced. We were created to know and to love God and to help carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. Somewhere along the path of humanity's journey, we got off track. How did we get off track? We drifted away from our purpose. We are spiritual beings just as we are physical beings. So the spirit of humanity have been tracking towards prejudice. Prejudice is the root of racism. And as Monique was sharing, the root of many other isms. Racism happens to be the most vile and extreme manifestation of prejudice. And we have to be careful because we all have some form of prejudice, either conscious or subconscious. And so we have to look within ourselves as individuals. I have to look in and see, what kind of prejudices do I have? And I must strive to eradicate those prejudices within myself. Because prejudice is prejudice, no matter in what vessel we might find it. As I work on my prejudice, I began to develop a more clearer understanding of my purpose as a human being in this world. My purpose is, again, to know and to love God and to help carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. I cannot participate in helping to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization if I have prejudices that get in the way. Because any human being that crossed my path, I relate to them with some degree of prejudice. And I don't think any of us are exempt. I've been in this world going on 78 years. I haven't met a perfect human being yet.
We need to hang out.
I'm sorry?
I was joking.
Oh yeah, no, don't make it a joke. Let's make it real. Let's do that thing. Yeah, so what I'm saying is I see prejudice as the root of all prejudice. I mean, of all of racism and all isms. Racism is the most extreme manifestation of prejudice. Because those people that are classified as racist, they find comfort in harming other people. They think that they have the authority to dictate to mankind who should live and who shouldn't live. They're totally off the grid. And the average racist is to me, it's like a cesspool. They consume a lot of garbage, unfiltered. They don't bother to investigate whether it's true or not. Anything that looks like the way they think and feel, they consume it without any independent investigation of the truth. And that's something that we're all responsible for. anything that I say I believe, I must independently investigate that for myself to determine whether it's true or not. We should not follow or accept anything blindly, no matter how influential the speaker. We must examine everything that we allow to, that we embrace in our minds and hearts to make sure that it's true. We should be seekers of truth, not of information, but of truth. And I found out along the way of life that most of the things people be saying, they don't even believe. They just repeat it because it sounded good. I'm kind of like Bahji. I have ADD or whatever also. So I'm going to be drifting around. I'm sorry.
We gotta leave time for questions, Daddy. I know you and how far you drift. We gotta let's be careful of time, as my kids.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Let me just read this quote, and we'll go from there. Racism retards the unfoldment of the boundless potentiality of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blight human progress. Recognition of the oneness of mankind, implemented by appropriate legal measures, must be universally upheld if this problem is to be overcome. That's from the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of Baha'i faith. And so, to close, we all must be engaged, as was stated, every one of us, including our children. And one of the things I do want to share, I'm exceedingly happy to see humanity going through this crisis, because it's revealing the social ills of all kinds. And we're at a point now where we can't deny it. We have to embrace it and strive to advance the whole of humanity. And I'm thankful for the young people, including the children, who are in the forefront of advancing humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Varner. I think we want to leave time for some questions. If people have questions, they can put them in the chat. I'm not seeing many right now, but we can certainly get to those. Would love to hear from you and to ask our panel whatever questions you might have. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts that came to mind to me as I was listening to the other panelists. So many amazing points and perspectives I had never heard before, stories I'd never heard before, and so many revelations. I think for a lot of people, one of the things I was confused about several years ago, and I think it is worth noting, and I think a lot of white people get confused about it, is the difference between prejudice and racism. So a lot of people will say, a lot of my relatives will say, well, Black people can be racist too. And while people of all different cultural heritages and backgrounds can certainly have prejudice in their heart, racism refers more to systems of oppression, where prejudice has been put into systems to hold certain people back. So that's an important differentiation for folks to listen to, because I still think that there's a lot of my white brothers and sisters that don't fully understand that. I think it also, I'm so glad that Bahji was talking about racism in terms of education too, because when we think about it, children are not born racist, right? There's no racist babies, not even racist toddlers. You know, there's not even racist preschoolers. At some point, I don't know, I'm not a specialist, but at some point in time, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't know how old, racism is taught to children. So it's always important to remember that we're not born racist. And Mr. Varner was talking about the great scourge in humanity of prejudice. And I think it's been there from the dawn of time, which is this concept of otherness. And perhaps at one point in humanity's development, and I'm talking way back in like caveman times, it was helpful. Perhaps it was like, this is my tribe. We live in this cave. We don't like the tribe that lives in that cave, or we're the village that lives in this valley. We don't like the village that lives in that other valley. They're different. They've got curly hair. We've got straight hair. We hate people with curly hair. Let's oppress them. That this is kind of the militarism that kind of was part and parcel with the development of the human race. But this whole idea of mistrust, fear of the other, and then oppression of the other is an important part to understand sociologically. This has been ingrained for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, but it's not going to cut it anymore, because we're one human family sharing the planet. And these recent demonstrations have shared that. I don't know if people have seen the video footage from people demonstrating in Japan in support of African Americans. The demonstration, tens of thousands of people in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne, demonstrating against police violence against the Aborigines in Australia. This has sparked a global movement for justice and against police brutality and systemic racism in other institutions. And one quick last thing I wanted to say, again, looking at this through a spiritual lens, and I'm glad Mr. Varner brought up our role to know and worship God and to bring forth an ever-advancing civilization. And there have been many references to this, that how, we've passed a lot of laws in the United States, and we needed to. We abolished slavery. We needed to do that. We abolished Jim Crow laws. We established the Voting Rights Act, Brown versus Board of Education. These laws are crucial. But where we've fallen short, and there need to be more laws, obviously, but where we've also really fallen short is the prejudice in people's hearts, and addressing that. Because you can pass laws and you cannot change hearts. I know a lot of my friends thought, oh, Obama's elected, we fixed racism. And it didn't really work out that way. So how do we change hearts? But we have to do both at the same time. And that's one of the things that I think the panelists have been sharing that I've really resonated with, and it's given me a lot of thought, is that both of these things work at the same time. There was that quote by Shoghi Effendi about how we have to change the environment of racism, the systems of perpetration of oppression, and change the hearts. And the hearts will change the system, and changing the system will change the hearts. But both of those things need to happen at the same time. So that sparked a lot of thought. So I want to hear from everyone on the panel. I will shut up, but maybe if there's some question, some questions that have come in. I'm not seeing many questions from folks. So go ahead, John or Monique, if you want to take it.
Yeah, so what do you recommend we do on the local level to further this cause, to address this issue right now? That's a question from Leslie Farrell from Tampa.
Okay, thank you. So one thing is you can go out to the marches, and you can, in Atlanta, every block that even in the middle of the street, people were just dropping boxes of chips and not really chips, granola bars, water. I was there yesterday with my principal sent out, my principal, the high school principal, the elementary principals, they sent emails out to, ours just came to the teacher and it was on the website page. So when I got inviting people to do a social distancing demonstration in support of Black Lives Matter. And so I don't know how long cousin was bringing her son to meet us. And I was talking to her in on the phone and she was like 3 blocks away saying, "Oh, I see y'all." I said, "No, you don't," because we're not up there. So it was like a mile stretch of children, families holding up all their, support for Black lives. There was a family with a baby in a stroller with a sign that they had scribbled. It didn't say anything but love, but it was on a stick. And, so that's just something, but in an ongoing basis, we have some core activities that that are called in the Baha'i community, that's known as the framework for action. So one thing that we do at my house is we have a weekly interfaith devotional. We talk about different subjects. We invite people to bring their own scriptures, poetry, song. We incorporate artwork sometimes. And so we're just trying to come together to see what our teachings have taught us on this subject. And then, we share and we learn from each other. My children are also doing that, a youth interfaith devotional. And then we have what's known as the Ruhi courses, and they go from, each book addresses a different service. So the first one teaches you how to do devotional gatherings. The second one teaches you how to go check on people, make sure they're okay, say a prayer with them. The third one teaches you how to teach children's classes. The fourth one teaches you a little more history of the faith. The fifth one teaches you how to engage. Talking too much? Huh?
No, keep going. This is great.
I saw my dad's mouth. I thought he was saying something. So the fifth one, it has been one of my favorites, absolute favorites, because it's called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. And so this was, parents, if you want to know how to make sure your kids have positive friends, please start a junior youth group. So bring the whole neighborhood into your house every week so you know what they're talking about and they know some good things, and you can help them look around them and see what they want to change and help facilitate their conversation on putting it into action so that they grow up knowing that they can make a difference. And in the process, they're serving and they're helping others, they're cleaning up some of the things that our junior youth, this isn't racism, but back to racism, cross-racial friendships. So my friends have been, we've been studying these, our Baha'i writings on racism every Sunday for a couple hours. And these friends I made in that junior youth age, because that's the age. I love middle school. I love teaching middle school because that's the age where kids are thinking for themselves. And so that's such a critical age to just, introduce these concepts that maybe everything in your history book isn't actually the truth. Maybe you need to practice independent investigation of truth. So when I was that age, we had this group called Atlanta Baha'i Youth Workshop. And every Sunday we came together for 4 hours. And the way that we reunited was one of our workshop directors passed recently, and he was a wonderful person. And we were like, we've got to do something. We missed each other in the process of trying to plan his memorial in Atlanta. And then we haven't been able to have it face to face because of Corona. In that process, we reunited and we're like, we just want to reconnect, so I have friends of all races all over the country, literally. And so when you spend that much time with people, every Sunday we would pray, we would study our writings, we would make up dances, raps, skits to teach Laylee, what's your name now? Muro, was in that group with me. All kinds of folks. Gisu Robin Bosch, I shared on my Facebook page. Her kids are doing these anti-racist videos for kids. I mean, because of we were like family. We had sleepovers. We went on trips doing performances in recreation centers. And so those close-knit cross-racial friendships, they don't allow you to believe the nonsense. And so they reach out to me now and they're like, okay, one of them knew, I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop saying names, but one of them reached out and said, I'd like to order a mask that says I can't breathe. Would that be okay? I don't know. I said, so it's those kinds of loving friendships where you can check in and say, I'm trying to show support. Can you help me? And so one last thing at school, we, the principal has been very supportive, ordered 40 books. Witnessing Whiteness is another great book for white people to figure out when this fallacy of whiteness was created. Anyway, please check it out. It's online. There's a free workshop series that's available online to help you form book clubs, study that with your white friends. Also, we've been studying post-traumatic slave syndrome by Joy DeGruy, another amazing mentor that I've known since I was about 12. And then the National Race Amity Institute, yes. The National Race Amity Institute has this awesome game called A Pluribus Unum, breaking it down towards oneness. And so teachers were voluntarily coming in early and staying late. And we were coming together and we were playing this game, and it's a board game, not enough pieces for everybody that wanted to play, but we all sat around and we talked and we laughed and some people cried, and we didn't play it as much as we wanted to, but we were gaining momentum with our conversations. And so those are just some ideas of things that you can do on the local level. One last thing, we have the Atlanta Baha'i Center is on Edgewood Avenue. It's become a very popular street. It's surrounded by clubs. It's like the nightclub district now. My kids said there's like a new name, they call it the Strip or something. I don't know, but we have property there. And so we are talking, yesterday, so this is how Providence works, y'all. Yesterday morning, a friend said, I'm thinking, why don't we try and have a race unity, a unity celebration? And so, and my dad was saying the youth are gonna lead us. I said, my son does music. My daughter, one of them used to promote for a nightclub, and it really, as a parent, it terrified me. But now that's a great skill because she can go in all those clubs and invite them to the unity celebration. So you never know why you are where you are, but what you learn you can use for somebody's benefit. So yesterday we went to the march. At the end, as we were leaving, and God bless Atlanta because they got rid of the police yesterday. There were no police yesterday at the CNN Center. We had a block party. We were surfing and swagging, and everybody's giving out free food. And I mean, it was absolutely amazing. There's this group of youth in their early 20s. And as we were leaving, they were like some of the last people there. They had a table set up. They had this big banner on the wall, on the what do you call it, fence. I said, what are y'all doing? It was just writing all over everywhere. They were like, well, they were so humble. None of them were Black. None of them were dark skinned Black, but some of them, one was kind of biracial, ethnically ambiguous. It's like to say these days. One looked like, I don't know, too white. And anyway, but they had such a humble posture. And they said, we just want to serve. We just want to do what we can. We're just trying to keep track of like everybody that's doing something positive in the community and help create a platform to share so everybody knows what everybody else is doing so we can combine efforts and strategically change our community. I'm like, what? And how old are y'all? And so they're going to help promote the youth interfaith devotions. They were so excited about it. They're going to help promote the what am I trying to say? The Unities concert. Okay, so that's just have faith in the youth, guys, because yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Bahji. And I'd love to hear more from Monique. And Monique, this question kind of specifically points to, what are Baha'is practically doing on the ground to combat racism? What tools are they using? How are they addressing the spiritual ill of racism? And I think one thing that Bahji is most specifically referring to, and I'd love to get your thoughts, is this idea of grassroots work. So Baha'is believe that it's not a top-down approach that's going to work, but it's grassroots connectivity, service, worship, study that's going to combat racism in the long term. And this institute process of devotionals, study groups, service projects, working with children, working with youth and teenagers is a big part of combating racism. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Baha'i vision, because a lot of people, a lot of the talk you hear on the media talks about the problem of racism, and then it talks about legislation, about laws or changing police departments or et cetera, or representation or increasing diversity. But beyond that, there's not really a vision for healing it, solving it, changing people's hearts. And so what are the Baha'i tools? What is the Baha'i vision towards that on the ground?
Rainn, I think that you said it best when you talked about that we can pass laws and we should pass laws and we have laws, but laws are only as effective as the people who enforce them. And so when Mr. Varner talked about racism being a spiritual problem, he was 100% correct. And our faith does teach us that. And if we have these laws in place, but people are not in a place spiritually where they're wanting to enforce them or courageous enough to enforce them, then those laws are not going to be effective. As for what you mentioned, and Bahji went into detail about the community work that we do as Baha'is. So if you're not sure where to start and you don't have a clue where to begin, then we do offer many community activities that can help people, at the bare minimum, getting people of different backgrounds into the same room together, into the same room to pray together. We know that in this country, Sunday is the most segregated day of the week, but for Baha'is, that's not the case. And so even if it's just a matter of having people of different races, different income levels, different educational backgrounds, different religions in the same room together to pray and to deepen on guidance of various religions and just to discuss these kinds of things, that's critical that we get in the same room together. So the community work that Bahji was talking about, I'm not sure she mentioned the children's classes, you may have, but I do want to say that, one of the most important things that we can do is to educate the children and to teach them the principle of the oneness of humanity. And our Baha'i children's classes, spiritual education classes, do just that. So if you aren't sure where to begin and you have children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, and you understand the importance of educating children in this regard, then that's one place to start. One other thing I wanted to say that hasn't been mentioned, because I can tell you that as I'm listening to Mr. Varner and to Bahji and to you, Rainn, you all have brought up so many points that I was hoping that I would hear you bring up. And so I won't repeat those, but I will say one thing that I haven't heard yet. And this is something that everybody on this call, on this Zoom, can do right now. When you hang up, it's a very easy thing to do and you can do it immediately. And that is to think about your opportunities to create change. And what I mean by that is, I know that all of us here have had conversations with people or have had situations occur where when it was over, we looked back and we said, oh my goodness, I wish I had said this. Oh my goodness, why didn't I think of that? And I think that we need to be prepared in advance. We need to know that these situations are going to occur on a daily basis. So let's get ready. And one of the ways you can get ready is you can role play. Just write down 3 things that maybe happened to you recently that you wish you had handled differently in this regard. And then role play how you would handle it. I can't stress how, for me, and it may not be apparent to anyone here, but for most of my life, I was a very, very extreme introvert. And I had to role play and talk myself into learning how to speak publicly. And then I became a teacher, and that helped with that. But even learning how to talk about difficult things in public, or with a stranger, or with an acquaintance, or with a coworker. So if you do take a moment just to think about, maybe write down, like I said, 2 or 3 things that have happened where you've said, when that person said this prejudiced thing, I could have said this, or I could have responded this way. And then role play it. Just role play it. Get your dog, your cat, your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife, and just role play that. That's something you can do right now, just to start to make yourself more comfortable with having these conversations.
That's wonderful. Mr. Varner, I have a question for you. A question came in from one of our participants named Victoria Arzu. And Victoria was talking about her journey about learning about faith. And she's studied Christianity and Islam and Hinduism. She's read some about Baha'i faith in the past, but she kind of considered it a Persian religion. She wasn't quite sure about it. And she's studying and reading different books, and finds herself a little bit skeptical. And she wanted to know, how do you know for certain that the Baha'i faith is the true path, that Baha'u'llah is who he says he is? And maybe you could share a little perspective to Victoria on her spiritual search, her spiritual journey.
My experience is filtering out all of the noise and continue in independent investigation of truth. Baha'u'llah said the truth is one, but the fools have multiplied it. And so everybody have their own opinion, their own understanding. We're bombarded with all kind of information. We have to filter all of that out. Study the writings of Baha'u'llah. Those writings will guide you to the truth. Study the writings of Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi and the guidance from the Universal House of Justice. Those writings and documents will guide you to the truth. And in that process, pray constantly to God to guide you to the truth. Your soul knows the truth. And when we turn to God in prayer and we study his word, his holy writings for this day, then we're guided. We will find truth. And you don't need anybody to interpret that for you. We can assist you in our limited understanding, but I have no doubt you will find and recognize that through prayer and meditation and study of the writings, you will find that truth and you will embrace that truth and you will be exceedingly happy. And one thing I want to share about what can we do right now, each one of us, expand our circle of friends. Make sure we are creating genuine friendships. We begin with our family, our friends, our coworkers, every aspect of our lives where we're engaged with other human beings, we have an opportunity to do something, to take action. And for My white brothers and sisters, one way you can show your genuine friendship to people of color is to invite them into your home, have a meal with them.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, I have very few white friends that have invited me into their homes in my lifetime, Baha'i or non-Baha'i. I have a brother, Ford Monajan. I call him, I say, what's for dinner? He gets very excited. And we go. I have a standing invitation for dinner at his home. And he's one of my best, he's my brother. So go ahead.
When you finish, I want to, my son wants to say something.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, we have an opportunity that we can have devotions with people, interfaith devotionals. We can have, connect with like-minded individuals and organizations and elevate the conversation for the advancement of humanity. There's all kinds of things we can plug into. Even in this, what do we call it? Even during this pandemic, I have connected with and reconnected with more people during this time than any time in my life. And, you know, for me, it's not technology. I feel just as close to my family and friends looking at their faces through this technology. It's like I'm in the room with you, or you're in the room with me. So we must exploit this opportunity that we have to reach out to more people. Because we, you know, when we're not in this situation, it takes a lot of time to travel to different places to connect with people. But right now, you know, we can do this instantaneously. So go for it.
Can I say that I know that person who just asked that question, and she is an incredible teacher. And she and her daughter have been, we were talking the other day, they've been trying to figure out what they can do, and they want to start something like American pen pals for cross-racial friendships between children. So, you know, that she's already on she's making change. My son, Ifeanyi, are you able to? They're trying to plug in my son. While they're figuring that out, I would like to share my
Muted.
He's muted.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Okay, Chuk, you can come in here with me. But while he's doing that, I want to share something that that confirms my faith in the Baha'i faith and Baha'u'llah and the teachings. Growing up, it just always made sense. I'm sorry. We have one God. All the religions are from one God. We don't have to tell anybody they're wrong. Everybody has spiritual truths. It's like chapters in a book. It's like grades in school. Like my dad said, the foolish have multiplied it. Like if we really take away our personal attachment to our understanding of things and look for what we have in common, every religion is going to tell you, treat people right, and try and grow closer to God with a lot more, but that's the basic, the golden rule. The other thing that I love about the writings is there are just so many teachings that apply in detailed fashion to the problems we're having now. The very first African-American Baha'i sent a picture of himself to Iran, Persia back then, to the leader of the faith, the Abdu'l-Baha. And this is what he said. Now, this is during the Jim Crow era. And so in the Bible, it talks about, you know, judge them by the fruit. I'm sorry, I don't know, but to judge by the fruits, okay? And so what he said in his letter to the first African-American Baha'i during a time when in this country they were being lynched and everything, he said, "O thou who art pure in heart, sanctified in spirit, peerless in character, beauteous in face, Thy photograph hath been received, revealing thy physical frame in the utmost grace and the best appearance. Thou art dark in countenance and bright in character. Thou art like unto the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet it is the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world. I have not forgotten, nor will I forget thee. I beseech God that he may graciously make thee the sign of his bounty amidst mankind. Illumine thy face with the light of such blessings as are vouchsafed by the merciful Lord. Single thee out for his love in this age, which is distinguished among all the past ages and centuries. And, you know, with what's going on right now, I've just been thinking about the fact that, you know, Black people were stolen from a continent. They don't like to tell you in history books, you know, how many people were actually stolen, how many died along the way. Taken from a continent to another continent 400 years later. You know, Ibram Kendi talks about having a bad day. How about a bad life? How about your mama, your grandmama, your daughter, your grandchild? You don't see anyone having a good anything. But Black people still have this faith in God. How? Last night how? Because of the spiritual capacity that comes from suffering. And on the way home from the marches last night, we stopped to get some wings and some fish. And this lady came up and she was asking for food, and I handed her some granola bars and stuff. And she said, well, I'm hungry. I really like a slushy. I'm hungry. And my daughter said, well, what do you want? She said, she was like, I'll get you some food. She said, can I get she ordered, and she was like, come on. She was like, they won't let me come in there because I'm not supposed to be out here asking people for stuff. And she said, well, I'll go pay for it. We're waiting on our order anyway, and then I'll bring you the receipt. So while my daughter was inside, we were just talking, and she's just telling me we heard a gunshot, and she was like, I don't know. I don't never know what's going on out here. This is so crazy out here. I said, well, things are going to get better because people are starting to realize, you know, I was like, and she was like, what are you talking about? She had no idea what was going on. This woman was obviously homeless. She had slippers and a bag, and that was all she had. And she had not heard of anything. The killing, I mean, she already knew, no, that's nothing new for us. And so we are so thankful that the veil is being lifted from the rest of the world, because we've been feeling like we're going crazy because nobody has been seeing it or acknowledging it. So thank you all for joining with us and supporting. But we showed her videos of the protests all over the world. She was so excited. And I shared the quotes that I just shared with you guys. I have not forgotten, nor will I forget thee. I was just boohooing the other night with that. And she was wiping her tears away. And I forget my point, but we need to redefine Black Lives Matter. That's just the beginning. And can you imagine that was identified as a terrorist organization? Just to say we matter, not we're better, not we want retribution, we want revenge. Just we matter. Can you acknowledge that we matter and stop killing our children and stop killing? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna stop. But so my kids and I have been talking about, like, how can we elevate the conversation? How can we talk about, I just want to start a campaign. It's already been started. I just want to help spread the ideas about how at the protests, we like, you know, Martin Luther King talks about, you can't fight hate with hate. You got to fight it with love. And so I love all the signs and the ones that are F this and F that, you know, I say it too sometimes, you know, but what's really going to work is love. You know, we have to, I want to encourage everybody to, instead of making a negative, because everything sends out energy, instead of, you know, cursing people, let's say let's help everyone recognize the spiritual nobility of Black people. Black lives don't just matter. Black lives are resilient. Black lives are, you know, just think of as many things as you can for your poster and let's get that movement going, because, you know, it shouldn't have taken that long for people to feel comfortable saying Black Lives Matter. And if you ever wondered, like, whether you would have been in those marches with Martin Luther King, if you were in them now, yeah, you would have. And if you aren't, no, well, we also have a pandemic. My son's a germaphobe. I thought you were coming in here to talk to. My son is a germaphobe. He didn't even want to go.
I can unmute from here. I've just.
This is the last point. My son is a germaphobe, didn't want us to even go to the grocery store until I think it was the third day of the marches. And he was like, are we just going to sit here and watch this? Because, I mean, people risked their lives in the 60s and it was way more dangerous. Like, we can go, we can wear our masks, we can socially distance, but we can't just sit on the sidelines. Like, I'm not going to be okay looking back and saying, yeah, I watched. So go ahead, Chuk, Brother Chuk, take it from here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists. Okay. Sorry. I wasn't anticipating video as well. I just submitted this question just through the chat portal and figured, and then I was asked to read it aloud.
It was a good question. That's why you're talking.
Appreciate it. It's a little bit longer one, and it includes an excerpt from a 2017 letter from the Universal House of Justice, where they quote Shoghi Effendi multiple times, and I kind of wanted to share that with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and start that so that it doesn't take too much time. So it says, there can be no question then that Baha'is are committed to efforts towards social transformation, much as the Friends must guard against in any way ever seeming to identify themselves or the cause with any political party. Shoghi Effendi, through his secretary, cautioned, they must also guard against the other extreme of never taking part with other progressive groups in conferences or committees designed to promote some activity in entire accord with our teachings, such as, for instance, better race relations. This involvement in activities for social reform and well-being can in certain circumstances even extend to taking part in demonstrations. A letter written on the Guardian's behalf indicated that he did not see any objection to Baha'i students taking part as Baha'is in a protest concerning racial prejudice on campus, since, quote, there was nothing political about it, end quote. And, quote, he does not see how they could remain indifferent when fellow students were voicing our own Baha'i attitude on such a vital issue and one we feel so strongly about, end quote. Thus, individual Baha'is are free to participate in those efforts and activities, such as peaceful rallies that uphold constructive aims in consonance with the Baha'i teachings. For example, the advancement of women, the promotion of social justice, the protection of the environment, the elimination of all forms of discrimination, and the safeguarding of human rights. And so I guess I was wanting to pick the panelists' brains and perspectives on that, and also if they could speak to the sort of false dichotomy between not being politically involved versus taking a stand and taking a part in being a protagonist in social action and social change.
Thanks very much. Thanks for reading that and for the question. And Monique, maybe you could address that. And we need to be conscious of time. We want to wrap this up here in the next 5 minutes or so. But Monique, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, Chuk, you said it so very well. It is a false dichotomy. And we have to understand that we have to meet people where they are as well. So when you, we have such a strong faith and understanding that the Baha'i principles are the solution to these problems. But sometimes I think that we want to get to the finish line as soon as the race starts, and we kind of want to skip steps in the process. And so sometimes people think in terms of, well, the community building work, because it is such a strong solution, is the only thing that they should be doing. But even to get people in the room to do that work, to get people who aren't Baha'is, who maybe aren't familiar with Baha'i principles, into the room to learn about those principles, we have to meet people where they are as well. We also cannot pretend that we are not part of this society. There's a Stevie Wonder song that says, one of the lyrics is, when you say you're in it but not of it, you're helping to make this place sometimes called hell, make this world a place sometimes called hell. So we can't say, well, we are in it, but we're not of it because we're Baha'is. No, we're in it and we're of it, and we need to participate with our fellow citizens in sincere and productive efforts that are not in conflict with Baha'i principles. So I'm essentially saying what you said, Shuk, and the Universal House of Justice, of course, said it better than I could ever say it, but just to kind of make it more brief and maybe more clear to people who aren't used to hearing messages from the Universal House of Justice, that as Baha'is, we are fully committed to working to end racism in whatever way that we can. In conjunction with our community building work, we'll stand side by side and we'll be in the forefront of other activities that are consistent with Baha'i principles of love, unity, peace, and justice.
Thank you so much, Monique. And thanks, Juke, for that question. Folks, we should wrap it up, but any last comments? Just real short, a minute long, to kind of help tie this up and end our discussion. Mr. Varner or Bahji, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say that we are responsible for one life to our Creator, to God. And we must make sure that we are in tune with our purpose of being created. And God has provided us with guidance in being able to do so. We have to stop listening to the noise. We have to connect with our own soul, develop our spiritual capacity, and serve humanity.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Please, Bahji, yeah.
So the last quote that I want to share and think about is, no light can compare to the light of justice. The establishment of order in the world and the tranquility of nations depend upon it. And then a separate quote, the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men. So if we could just resonate on how justice is a prerequisite to unity. It's going to be hard. And I underestimated where people were. I had a conversation with a mentor that I just want to, I so appreciate his patience with me and his example, because I get very angry and upset, but I didn't think people would be ready for unity. But those marches, y'all, if you haven't been, just drive past them and put your fist out the window and hold everybody's ready. It's there. It's the sea of humanity out there calling for justice and unity. So thank you.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Monique, Bahji, Mr. Varner. Thanks to the Baha'i community of Clearwater, and maybe John or someone else from Clearwater can talk a little bit about some links people can go to, or to find out more information about what's happening in Florida, or with this speaking series. Bahji shared a link at 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's coming up soon. There's a webinar on the pupil of the eye, that concept that was brought up by the great speaker, Derek Smith. He's an amazing author, speaker, humanitarian, speaking about this spiritual concept of African Americans being like the pupil of the eye, that the light passes through and is refracted from. So that's something to check out. And John or someone from Clearwater, you want to talk just a little bit more specifically as we wind this down?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Rainn Wilson. Thank you so much, everybody on the panel. Thank you all for coming out, taking your time on a Sunday to talk about this extremely important issue. First and foremost, the Baha'is of Clearwater who have sponsored this, they all thank you so much for taking your time to address this extremely important issue as we strive for race amity, racial unity, and not just not just seeing the problem, but we're trying to address it. And there are some really good solutions that were actually provided. And whoever is listening to this on the butt end coming in towards the end of this, please, we're going to have this video posted online. And that leads us to this point. So if you want to find this video and the recording of it, we really recommend you go to www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. That website you can share. We're going to be posting the video there. And there you have access to our YouTube channel, and you also have access to our Facebook. You can go directly to Facebook, facebook.com/Clearwater Baha'i Center. And that's where we have the live video going right now. Same thing goes with YouTube. If you just look up Clearwater Baha'is, you'll see a collection of our previous past speakers we've had, as well as this one with Rainn Wilson. More importantly, again, if you want to find out more about this amazing message, the Baha'i message, go to www.baha'i.org, BAHAI.org. And you can find a lot more information there and a lot of resources to communicate, to get in contact with people in your local community. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.